Hold on.
Can you hear me now?
I think so.
Nope.
Try it again, John.
Can you hear me now? Nope. Hello? There we go. Okay, the June 2nd Planning and Zoning Commission is now called to order. Anybody that wishes to speak today, make sure you sign in beforehand and give Natalie? Lori.
So that
name and address.
So the sign up, the speaker sheets are right there on top of the lectern. If you can fill one out and give it to Lori when you speak, then we can put that in the minutes for who spoke at the meeting.
Okay, the Planning and Zoning Commission is an independent advisory body of the City of Ames Council. The Planning and Zoning Commission members are volunteers of the community and not part of the city administration. The commission is responsible for preparation and adoption of official comprehensive plan of the city and gives advice and recommendations on matters involving amendments to the zoning ordinance and the historic preservation ordinance and guidelines, subdivisions, annexes, master plans, major site development plans, and developments within the Ames urban fringe areas. As an advisory commission, we welcome all comments and questions. We make our recommendations based on code, the facts presented, and the input from the public. If the proceedings become lengthy, we may ask that comments be focused on newer information not previously presented. You may speak only once on an agenda item. If you wish to speak, we ask for individuals to use the raise hand function within the Zoom meeting or...
Yes, we won't read the Zoom
Yeah,
parts.
I don't need to read that. The order of the proceedings for each item on the agenda will be as follows. City staff will present the staff report regarding the agenda item. Commission members will have an opportunity to ask questions of the city staff. The applicant will be invited to make a statement regarding the request. Commission members will have an opportunity to ask questions of the applicant. Members of the audience will be invited to come forward to offer comments and questions. Once the public comment is closed, city staff and the applicant will have an opportunity for concluding remarks. The commission will discuss the application based on all presentations and any comments given, and come to recommendation for the city council. The discussion may include further questions of city staff and the applicant for clarifications. With that, we'll move to the first item on the agenda. In the introduction of the commission members, I'm John Emery, the chairperson.
Ruth Holstrom.
Mike Clayton.
Anupreet Minhas.
Jen's dancer.
Okay. And the next item on the agenda is the approval of the agenda. Motion for approval.
I'll make a motion to approve.
I'll second.
So approved. All those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed, say nay. Approved. Item number 4, the approval of the minutes of the May 5th, 2021 meeting. Do I have a motion to approve?
Motion to approve the minutes of May 5, 2021.
Second.
All those in favor, say aye.
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 Opposed, say nay. So approved. Item number 5, the public forum may come before us and address anything that is not on the agenda today. Do we have anybody who wants to speak on anything not before the council or commission right now? Come forward and name and address.
Right here. The podium.
This one.
Very simple. Very.
Where the
Podium.
podium is.
Sorry. No. Just a very simple, quick question. I didn't hear the gentleman in the suit introduce himself.
I'm Kelly Diekman. I'm the Planning and Housing Director for the city.
I'm sorry.
of
Say
Ames.
again.
I'm Kelly Diekman, the Planning and Housing
Diekman.
Director for the City of Ames. So I'm staff.
Okay.
for the
Thank you.
city.
I'm Bruce Johnson. I live just adjacent to the area being considered.
Anybody else? Move on to item number 6.
I have, is this for the, are we speaking for the?
We're not there yet.
You have to come up to the mic.
We're not there yet.
We're not there yet?
Almost.
Okay.
Okay.
Clarifying. Thank you.
Okay, item number 6. Rezone with master plan for 4514 and 4605 Hyde Avenue, Auburn Trail. City.
Hello, my name is Eloise Solstrom, and I'm city staff in the planning department. I'm going to be presenting this item. You can't hear me?
I can barely hear you.
Oh,
Or is it just me?
Put a little closer.
I know it's on.
Okay.
So this item is to rezone 2 parcels that are addressed at 4605 and 4514 Hyde Avenue. When properties come into the city as an annexation, they are automatically designated agricultural. So these 2 properties are currently designated agricultural, and the property owner has requested rezoning. This shows the properties up close. So to the south of this property is Bloomington Heights. To the north, where it says FSRL, is the property previously referred to as Rose Prairie. It's not developed yet. It is now being called Hayden's Preserve. And that blue area to the east is Ada Hayden. So this property, because of its location so close to Ada Hayden, is required when it is developed to follow the conservation subdivision guidelines. The request is to rezone the property FSRL, which is residential low density. And I did want to show this as well. This is from our land use policy plan, which says the policy plan is kind of like an umbrella guiding the zoning. And so any zoning has to be in compliance with the land use policy plan. And the current designation in the land use policy plan is village suburban residential. And so the FSRL is in conformity with this land use policy designation. So the parcels make up 75, just over 75 acres. I'm going to go ahead and show this. This is the master plan that accompanies the rezoning. The master plan is a conceptual look at the property. It doesn't look at all the details. It just looks, so it's kind of a broad brush stroke of where development would occur, where open space might occur. But in particular, it looks at connections, road connections to existing stubs and so forth, and some interconnectivity. And so it's required to look at what's within 200 feet of the property and to look at the grades and so forth. So this master plan is part of the rezoning, but it doesn't get into the detail that subsequent phases will get into. The preliminary plat will look at grading and elevations of structures and buildable lots and so forth, and it will have to comply with the conservation subdivision ordinance. So the conservation subdivision standard was put in place to protect the quality of water in Ada Hayden Lake and to protect existing surface drainage systems, promote interconnected greenways, provide commonly owned open space and conservation areas, and protect such areas in perpetuity. So this gives some idea of what might occur. And it looks at existing wetlands that are on the site. There's just some small, thin wetland corridors. Well, there's one to the south that's that way, and then a spot to the north. So you can see those areas are designated open space. So the proposal at this point is to show two categories of development. One would be single family attached detached with 98 to 111 dwelling units. And the second, which is shown in the purple, is single family townhomes and small lots with 50 to 70 dwelling units. And the development area would be approximately 36.29 acres with 24.46 acres of open space, detention, and buffers. As I mentioned, the master plan is consistent with the limitations noted in the, I guess I didn't say this already. There was a pre-annexation agreement that was approved by the City Council in 2013, and the master plan is consistent with those limitations. Some of what the pre-annexation agreement addressed was infrastructure, and so now the infrastructure has been put in place. I do apologize that within the findings of the addendum, there's a misstatement in item 4 about the infrastructure. Actually, the infrastructure is in place, and the developer would be paying connection fees for the water and sanitary sewer. And that was all described in that pre-annexation agreement of 2013. So I'll just go through the findings of fact and leave it open then for you to ask any questions that you might have. So the findings of fact, the municipal code allows owners to file for a rezone, which is what Hunzecker has done. They are the property owners and represent 100% of the ownership that's of the property requested for rezoning. The subject property has been designated as village suburban residential in the land use policy plan, and the the zoning category of FSRL, which is suburban low-density residential, is compatible and consistent with the village suburban residential. And it would allow detached and attached single-family housing types. Infrastructure, as I mentioned, is available with stubs adjacent right at the property line. And the developer would be responsible for connection fees for the water and sanitary sewer service districts that were established as part of the agreement 2013. The master plan identifies developable areas and range of uses consistent with the proposed zoning. And of course, subsequent development will be subject to subdivision review and the details of the code being met for the conservation subdivision and other code requirements. And the municipal code requires a master plan that is put forth with the rezoning, which is here before you. And so with that, staff would recommend that you approve alternative number 1, which is to rezone the acreage to recommend to the city council to approve the request for rezoning from A agriculture to FSRL suburban low density with the attached master plan based upon staff's findings and conclusions as found in the addendum. And I'll entertain any questions that you have.
Didn't we address this 2 months ago? Just before we did.
So we talked about Rose Prairie's rezoning in April. We have not talked about Auburn Trails rezoning before.
Okay.
So Rose Prairie is just to the north on the left of this property. And this property, you can see there's 2 connections with arrows that say connection to Rose Prairie. The one to the east that says connection to Rose Prairie is a connection, but not to Rose Prairie. That's actually county undeveloped land over there.
Then has the city done any more research on the coal mine?
I'll let the applicant speak to that. We've looked at a little bit of information. I don't think there's anything definitive that we found about it, but I think Justin Dodge can speak to that with more information.
Okay. Anybody else have, Anu, do you have any questions? Jen?
Yeah, I guess I would like to ask a question about the east parcel. I'm not sure which number it is, but it seems like there's already one existing property on there. And I'm wondering if it makes sense to rezone both parcels equally if that parcel isn't going to be cut and divided into multiple parcels and instead just stay as it is now. Because I'm just wondering if they're considering demolishing the parcel that's already on there or the property that's already there to make more properties and cut and divide it, or just keep it the same. If so, it might make more sense to zone it strictly as it is today and not adjust it, basically.
So what we've seen is an additional 1 parcel for a developable lot just to the south, immediately to the south of the existing home.
Mm-hmm.
And then you can see there's a large amount of open space that would include some stormwater detention. And I think as mentioned in the staff report, which I didn't highlight, but there has been some discussion about a trail connection from this property over to Ada Hayden. And the trail would go toward the south end of that property where it's kind of tricky right now with the grading to determine how exactly where it would go. It's a little bit unknown at this point. Okay. But yes, there would be 1 additional lot as proposed.
Okay. So 1 additional lot and then some stormwater infrastructure and a trail.
Yes.
Okay. I guess then my concern would be that addresses the question I was really getting at is I didn't want to see a bunch of small little properties get cut and divided into what is already an acreage right now.
Anything else? Ruth?
I have nothing right now.
Mike?
No.
Okay, at this time, we asked the applicant is invited to make a statement regarding the request.
Evening, Commission. Justin Dodge, Hunsaker Companies, 105 South 16th Street. I was thinking back to the last time I was actually in this room and speaking at the podium. I think it was in 2019. It's been a long time, so it's good to see everybody in person again. So before us tonight is the rezoning, and it's consistent, it's straightforward. We did understand the concerns about the coal mine. We overheard that with Rose Prairie's discussion when they were before this body. And so looking back at the historical, I think it was called the Johnson Shaft. The only directions that we could find, or even at the Genealogical Society, was that it was north of Ontario Station and east of the Squaw Creek. And so we don't know if somebody just, took a pin and, oh, this is the parcel, because it met those two directional components. So anyway, we went back and we've sought out additional information. The concern that night, I believe, John, was from you about some of the collapses down in Des Moines. And so what we have found from the Geological Society, I think I misspoke the first time around, sorry about that, was that the soils in Story County are not conducive or weren't conducive for horizontal mining. And so they were all vertical shafts. And so we don't have to worry about any collapses from horizontal shafts, but we need to do our due diligence to make sure we don't have a vertical shaft on the site. And so we've actually contracted with the University of Iowa. They've got the Geological Society there, and they've got some type of testing apparatus that, basically surveys subsurface, so we can tell if there was an old vertical shaft mine on this property. So they'll be here, I think it's sometime this month. We don't have those results yet, but we took your comments very serious and have spent thousands of dollars to research that and to make sure that we don't have any issues on down the road. Let's see. I think that addressed most of the questions. I think Jen's question got answered by Eloise, but I'm happy to answer any questions.
So you haven't been able to pinpoint the shaft?
No, or even if it's on the parcel. Like I said, those
on the map for the, I can't even remember what it was called for.
Yeah.
Geological Society.
Yep. And so
Des Moines, they had it pinpointed.
Yeah, and the
right,
two
right around here.
Yep, and the two descriptions that we received from them were so vague that you couldn't even pinpoint it to any one parcel. And so that's why we're spending the extra money to do that research.
That's all I was going by, their map. Yeah. And I didn't want to, have a house planted on top of it.
Nor do we. Nor do we. That would be a insurance nightmare in my mind. Okay. So, but I know that there are some folks in the audience that likely have some questions. And all I offer is that I'm happy to stick around after the meeting if anyone wants to have some one-on-one conversations, and I can help answer anything that doesn't pertain to the rezoning tonight. And so that way you guys can get any information you need, as well as my contact information. So.
But you'll be pulling the water away from the existing subdivisions?
Yeah, and so part of what Eloise was talking about with the conservation subdivision is that it focuses on minimizing mass grading. And so that's why you see the open space and as much open space as you see on the map, because we're trying to preserve a lot of those natural flows, and it naturally flows to the southeast and then eventually goes underneath what's now known as Hyde, and then through that little channel and into Ada Hayden. And so part of the conservation subdivision, as well as our stormwater ordinance, we have to actually detain that water and slow it down and release it as if this was a meadow in good conditions with Class B soils, so very porous soils. So we'll actually be detaining more stormwater, significantly more stormwater on site and releasing it slower than when it was farmed.
We can ask questions then.
Yeah. Do you have any questions? Okay, Jens?
So is that so you're envisioning surface water then, like an open pond that at that point in that like southeast corner then? Is that what you're describing?
Well, there's going to be a couple of things. One, city staff focuses in on a treatment train. So we're treating the stormwater as it flows throughout the site. But we are also envisioning, and this will all come to light in our preliminary plat. But at this point in time, we're envisioning on the west side of Hyde, where it says open space, so the 5.15.
Yes.
There would be a wet pond there.
Okay.
And then even on the east side of Hyde, where it says open space, we're envisioning a wet pond there.
2 wet ponds.
So we're still working through engineering right now on all those things. So, but that's what we believe will happen. We just don't know for sure yet.
Yeah.
Could you speak a little bit to what happens? I mean, there are properties just along the south edge of the subject site. Can you speak a little bit about what impact the stormwater would have in that southeast edge on the properties on the south, and maybe some of the things that you are thinking of that you might want to do to sort of have that protected to a certain extent, I guess?
Yeah, yep. And so, as I said before, tonight we're focused on the rezoning, but I'm happy to answer questions to the best of my ability, on things that are coming down the line. So that way we minimize questions and are very clear and transparent on what the expectations are. So along the border to what is Bloomington Heights on the west side of Hyde, we'll have a buffer there. It's already conveying some stormwater, and so we need to maintain that and continue to drain that stormwater to the east. In our, let's see, I don't think we've shown it on this one, but in some of the layouts that we've worked with city staff on, we do have a trail that would also be located within that green space on our property. And then going to the east side of Hyde, we're envisioning some type of, as I said, a pond. And so there would be quite a bit of buffer from the neighbors on the east side of Hyde to the south. So what the layouts look like right now is the existing channel would be maintained. And then we would likely have the trail that ties in with Ada Hayden. And then we'd have our stormwater pond.
I appreciate that. I know this is not necessarily the time, but I know there have been some concerns about stormwater, so I appreciate it.
Yeah, yep. And I believe Public Works also has, because the existing channel on the east side of Hyde is cutting in and starting to undermine. I think there's some concrete patios and things like that on the townhomes. And so that was already identified as a problem area. And I believe that there is a project in the capital improvements plan with the city to address that. So it's a known condition.
Excuse me, where was that again?
It's over in the townhomes. You can see it on an aerial map. Is that you?
So there's a,
You got it.
could you just repeat what you said again? Sorry.
Any other commission questions?
Yes.
I
I did have one comment. So I see that there's already a wet pond just to the south of this property right there. I'm just wondering if that pond is okay, or have the properties around it had any problems with it, because there's no better way to know if there's going to be a problem than looking right next door. So I don't know if that's a very indirect question, but I see that. I just think it might look funny having two ponds right next to each other like that. So I'm just wondering if there's been consideration to a relocation of the stormwater pond, given that there's already one right where it's being considered.
Yeah, and so that's the lowest area of the entire subdivision.
Yeah.
And so Bloomington Heights drains to that area. If we were to incorporate their stormwater into ours, because we have stricter standards than what they had when Bloomington Heights was developed, the amount of area that it would take up is greatly enlarged. And so that's the same reason why we're not capturing the existing stream, is our stormwater facilities would grow dramatically if we had to capture and treat that water, because the water from that pond is also releasing into that stream.
And you're saying that that pond was designed to a previous standard, that you guys are now at a what you'd say a higher standard?
Correct. And it's somebody else's property.
Right.
It's not
Of course.
I don't want to cross.
This is more just, I'm just, of
and
course.
take on somebody else's
Right.
stormwater.
So then would that stormwater come into your, into this rezoned property's stormwater path as well? Like right now, it discharges into the same stream that would eventually go to Ada Hayden?
Correct.
Okay.
Yep.
I guess then the consideration would be just to make sure it's designed that it, like that flow, if that pond wasn't designed to the new standard, then that standard is then brought into consideration with the not part of it.
So it's completely off-site, so
Gotcha.
they have no obligation to deal with somebody else's prior
Thank you.
infrastructure installations. So if the water was being conveyed through the site, they have to not interrupt that, not impede it, allow for it to fully function as designed, but they can't go off-site and make enhancements to someone else's property that was for something like this that was already done a while ago.
Thank you.
So they can't do any addressing of the problem along the south side at all.
It's not there.
That's
So
the Bloomington Heights problem.
Well, right. So Hunziker is not responsible for prior development conditions.
Okay.
Their obligation is to not make things worse and then meet current performance requirements, which is what you'll see when you see their stormwater management plan and their preliminary plat. You'll understand a little bit more how the two systems interact and where they're divided, because it is right on the buffer there with their conservation area.
Anybody else?
I guess I just have one additional question. I guess I'm not super familiar with the conservation subdivision requirements per se. So I'm just curious if you're proposing potentially, I mean, obviously detention basins can be unique and really make a subdivision look kind of aesthetically pleasing. But I'm curious if you're proposing anything in terms of trying to use it as like a focal point of the subdivision in any way. Either one of those, I guess, detention basins that you're thinking might get put in place.
Yeah, and so one of the guidelines that Eloise had mentioned was minimizing mass grading. And so in order to achieve that, we need to utilize the current land and the contours and the low areas to the best of our ability. And so those are the lowest spots on the land. And so it makes sense. Now, in my opinion, the lots that will be abutting those ponds will be nicer lots and enjoy overlooking the water.
I guess I was thinking more in the sense of like native plantings or something like that, that could be beneficial in terms of improving water quality while at the same time being aesthetically pleasing.
So if I can just step in, so you're a little bit literally into the weeds. But so in the conservation ordinance, I'll respond to that. So it has a kind of three different things it's trying to do. It sets aside 25% of a site for open space, and rather than 10, which is the normal standard. It also requires you to minimize grading and have a little more buffer areas around known natural resources, which could be wetlands, it could be stream channels, it could be woodlands if they were present on the site. So you have more of a requirement to work around areas rather than clear them. And then the third thing is more of a design issue where you are required to have 80% of lots abut open space. So whether there's a functional value to the open space for stormwater or not isn't necessarily relevant to that one. It's more of an aesthetic combination there. So then after the conservation ordinance was adopted, the city also adopted Chapter 5B, which is their stormwater management chapter. So it takes the qualitative treatment train approach that's part of the conservation subdivision kind of design and layout approach, and then adds in the quantitative components. So within the conservation ordinance, there is expectations for native plantings. There are restrictions on pesticide and fertilizer use to try and minimize, again, to maintain water quality for Ada Hayden. So there is a stormwater management plan and a landscape plan that comes with a conservation subdivision that's a little different than everywhere else in the city. So you'll see that kind of material at the next level. At this point, what you see is just the green areas, which is the most, they will be open spaces that fit the intent of the conservation ordinance.
No, I definitely appreciate all of that background information. I feel like that hopefully is maybe helpful to some of the residents that live out there as well, that might have concerns about the water quality issues that could arise from more development. So thank you.
And the purpose of this plan is to minimize the impact on Ada Hayden. Is that correct, Kelly?
Yeah, that was the genesis of the ordinance, was to take a more conservative approach to development and have extra levels of stormwater management built into the subdivision ordinance because of the surface water flowage into Ada Hayden that we want to be on top of.
That's our emergency water.
Yeah, it's more about water quality for the lake itself than it is about drinking water quality. So we're more concerned maybe about the nutrient loads in the lake. Yes, it is a secondary support for our water system, but it's about the water quality more than anything else.
Anybody else have any other questions?
I had a couple of follow-up questions, one for Kelly and one for you. Were you required to have a neighborhood meeting as part of the rezoning process at all? No.
No.
Okay. Do we require that at all?
No.
For nothing at all in the city?
Only major land use policy plan amendments, we've had one in 7 years.
Okay. Given that there's no requirement, I assume there's been has there been any sort of proactive reach out to either citizens or people or groups of people around? Not at this point, and that's absolutely okay.
This is my first meeting in public in over a year, so okay. I think even if we offered that, I think, over the last, no, we have not.
Okay, and that's okay. Again, it's not a requirement. It's just, I was just curious if there's been any proactive outreach yet. Okay, thank you. I don't have anything for Justin, right? Yeah, I don't know if he needs to go back. I do have a follow-up for Kelly.
Go ahead.
Again, this is not, thank you. I know we are looking just at rezoning, and some of the stormwater concerns will probably come up later, but just because we did touch on it, and there was a little bit of discussion on the impact of stormwater on the site, which is not of the site's making, and specifically on the southwest side and what's coming in. Again, I understand that the applicant need not look at or mitigate some of those impacts, but when we're looking at sort of a little bit of a step back and look at a broader area sort of thing, I assume some of that would probably be addressed when the city starts looking at the stormwater.
It probably gets a little beyond what I can explain. So the city doesn't manage all stormwater easements in the city. So certain HOAs, certain private property easements are the responsibility of homeowners. Some facilities are also managed by the city for long-term, capacity and quality. So it kind of varies across the city. So I wouldn't say that every subdivision that Public Works comes in and assesses its condition and how it's working on a regular basis. It wouldn't be in my scope to normally know exactly how they're managing their stormwater capital projects.
Would this come forward to city staff in the future for this subject site?
I can't say that it would or wouldn't, because I don't know the background of the responsibilities for the properties to the south.
how about just the subject site as they move forward with the plat and the actual master plan and stuff? Would the city come in? Would there be opportunity for the city to look at the impact of stormwater management just from the subject site?
Yeah, absolutely. That's a prerequisite for getting your preliminary plat approved. Yep.
Thank you.
This will come back to us when it's plotted, right?
Yeah, so if the master plan's approved, then the developer has zoning and they have confirmation of the density and housing types that they can work with to get to a lotting pattern. And I believe Justin could have spoken to this, but I believe they would be coming back later this summer to try and get the first or get the whole thing platted and then come back with an addition and start work this year still.
Any other questions? Then we had an email about this. Does that need to be read into the record?
I'm not sure what email you're speaking about. We don't normally read emails into the record.
It was
Do you file
last
them?
night at 10:29 p.m. I forwarded it to the commission members.
So we don't normally read things into the records. Like council fields all kinds of emails. They might say we received input from the public concerning such and such issue, but we don't normally read them into
The property owner was on the street here to the south of the southwest corner.
Yeah. Right.
Yep.
Of this development.
Right.
Okay. Members of the audience are invited to come forward to offer comments and questions on this.
Oh, I
Name and address, please.
Diane McCulley, 4257 Eisenhower Lane, Unit 10. That is in the townhome that is directly south of this east section. And I am also the president of our homeowners association there. When I look at this, I'm kind of glad that there's not going to be development extremely close to us, but I'm still trying to get my arms around how they could get stormwater detention on that piece of property. And it's probably a little early. I realize that that's probably in more detail later, but there have been drainage issues in our neighborhood. We've had water in basements, the street on Hyde, right about at the south end of this part, water pools there, and there was a pond in the street at one time not that long ago. So that we do have some significant drainage issues in that area. One thing I'd be concerned about if there was a detention pond at the top, if you look at the topographic map, that is a very, very steep hill relatively, down to the stream that directly runs to Ada Hayden, or the drainage ditch, it's essentially. The drainage ditch. And so if there were ever a failure of that detention pond at the top of a hill, that concerns me a bit, and I think needs to be considered as we move forward. And I know you indicated it wasn't quite determined yet, and I just can't see how they could possibly grade it and make that work. The other thing, the culvert was replaced with a much larger culvert under Hyde Avenue, right at the base of this property, when they improved Grant Avenue north to Gilbert. But I do know I live directly beside that culvert, essentially, and the stream is right down there behind my house. But that culvert runs, they increased the size by like 4 or 5 times, but it runs full when there is a big rain. So I just wanted to make sure, I would assume that when the road improvement was done, that the drainage was adequately allowing for this development, but That's another concern of mine. So, yeah. I think that takes care of my concerns. Mostly the drainage and any impact on Ada Hayden, because that does flow directly in there, and that's not much of a stream except when it rains, and it's a pretty good stream when it's raining.
Okay. Kelly, do you have anything to say to her?
No.
No?
If there was a question, I could try to answer it, but I mean,
Yeah.
a lot of that's stuff that we'll see when we get
We'll
to the next
see.
phase.
Yeah, and I would just like city staff to be cognizant of our concerns as they move forward with reviewing and working on the environmental issues. I don't think I can say that I have a complaint necessarily with the rezoning that was going to be inevitable when I bought my place. But just I would like some care in the future. You did indicate that there was some drainage improvements in that area in the master plan. Is
So
that correct?
In the city's capital improvement program, we do have a program for stormwater erosion control and just kind of management of different waterways broadly across the city. There is a project, I don't know the details about it, that is meant to be from Hyde towards Ada Hayden. I don't know the scope of it, but it's in the CIP as a city project. So if you're interested in that CIP project, we can get you in touch with Public Works Department, and one of their engineers can explain what that would be.
Appreciated.
Okay.
Yeah, just because that's directly, our property goes to the fence, there's a stream, and then the next.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Anybody else?
Excuse me, my name is Bruce Johnson, and it was nice to meet my colleague from across Hyde. I live on the west side of Hyde in Bloomington Heights West Townhomes. We're the people with the aforementioned drainage pond that was commented on earlier. I live about a half block from that pond, which is not visible.
Okay.
And I guess I too am just interested in some assurance that our drainage pond is not going to be adversely affected by the new ponds being planned for this development. I understand the comment made earlier that the developer can't do anything to change ours because it's not in his property. But if something in the new property adversely affects us, then it'd be nice to know about that ahead of time. Currently, we don't have any drainage problems west of Hyde, knock wood. Our drainage system seems to work fairly well. I don't know of anyone in our development that has any problems with water in the basement, but it would be nice to know that we can count on that continuing into the future. So I don't know if there's anything that can be, any assurance that can be made that the new, actually somebody once told me from a geology continuing education program that those are actually called grade stabilization structures. If the new ones will not adversely affect the existing one that we have right now. And I appreciate your comments about being careful of drainage. So just make sure that that we know what's going on, because we have some concerns in Bloomington Heights West Townhomes about that as well.
Thank you.
If I could ask a question.
Go ahead.
Yeah, so.
Could I add something too? Just FYI. When you look at the map, some of these maps, it looks as though about half our townhomes aren't indicated on this map. So it's that have been there for 20 years. So there's a little empty spot, and that is developed. So just FYI. I wanted to make sure, because that's my house that's not on the map.
Okay, thank you. Ma'am?
Hello.
My name is Shahiza, and I actually live on Laurel, which is, can we change the map for a second? Eloise, remember the one we talked about?
Oh, I can put that one down.
So my issue is, like, I've heard that a lot of this is not Hunsker property. It's not in all of the association. So will city take care of the water problems in the neighborhood, existing neighborhoods? So I live on Laurel Street. It's that corner house right there. Okay. Can we see the one you had just before, the one in color?
I thought this maybe showed the drainage flow and the structure.
So most of
the other one better?
Yeah, because the other one shows most of the drainage around our neighborhood is at the end of the property or they're underground. The issue you see here, the third house from Valbeck, their drainage comes out towards the field, but then it turns and goes into our property line where it drains. The issue with that is when you have like flash flood warning within an hour, that whole area is full of water. The whole end of Valbeck is full of water. And it starts draining into the field. And I actually have a picture of just what happens within,
I don't know.
Did you lock it? Sorry, or maybe it won't show. It's, oh, there it is.
There, it's focusing.
So this is what's happening. This is within an hour of flash flood warning. If you get more than an hour of rain, that water, thankfully, it doesn't come up to our house, but it does go into the fields. It does go over at the end of the Valbeck. What's going to happen with all that water once they start developing? And if they're not going to take care of it, who will? Like, I don't want that water to come to us. And I know you didn't want to like hear the email, and I'm not sure what's in that email, but I do know the owner of that house to send an email. Last time we had this 2 years ago when it started, there was so much water, it had nowhere to go. It started backing up into most people's basements. It took their whole sump pump out. And that person to send an email, their house was one of those houses. So where's all of this gonna go when they develop? How's that gonna be taken care of? Because it's not the end of the property, so it doesn't have much. It's in the middle of our property. We cleaned as much as possible. I know other neighbors have complained to the city, and they said they'll come and check it out. No one has ever come out to look at it, and we're still dealing with it. So what happens when they start developing north of us, when their water has nowhere to go?
Are you directing the question at city staff or?
Kind of both.
Yeah.
Because
I think we're
it kind of
a little
came out, it's
off
not their
track for how the
responsibility
public hearings
because
work
it's,
tonight, but
yeah.
so there's no way to answer that tonight. You will see a stormwater management plan from the developer when they have lot layouts and utility plans. So at that point, you'll be able to get a much more educated, informed answer from city staff or from the developer's engineer on how it interacts with the existing stormwater facilities that exist south of the site.
But if that hasn't been taken care of thus far, how do we know it's going to be taken care of once they start building? Because we were just had it that it's not their responsibility because it's not on their property.
So that's where I can't answer the questions. Clearly, this project and put a flowage easement all the way across all of these lots. It's intended to carry water. That was how it's designed. I can't really answer more than that because it's the municipal engineer that is responsible for the stormwater program in the city, and I don't have details on that.
Mm-hmm.
That Tracy Warner and her staff are the people that manage the stormwater systems in the city. All I can say tonight is that before the next property can be developed, they have to prepare a stormwater plan that's reviewed with the plat before it's approved, so we can all understand what the effects are within the development and also with the interactions with the adjacent properties.
Okay. And then with the Valbeck Road connecting through that new property coming up, that's very low area, it collects a lot of water. And I'm guessing if you start building houses, raising it up, again, I see it more backing into the neighborhood rather than going to that collection pond.
And we just don't have that detail to give you any assurance tonight because that's a step that's going to be later this summer. Where we
Maybe send them out when it's raining so they can see it firsthand.
So one thing to be clear about, the contours here are existing conditions of the field. This is not a grading plan. So I hope no one's reading this as the actual grading plan for the site. And it's just really existing conditions. And there's really nothing we can add tonight about the stormwater in terms of actual details.
Okay. Who can I reach out then to like go more over what's going to happen?
So the Public Works Department, the municipal engineer, Tracy Warner, is the individual that's responsible for our stormwater management programs across the city.
All right. Thank you.
And also, I'd get a hold of your city councilman.
Well, I've also heard many neighbors have already tried and nothing.
So that's what I was trying to answer.
Not much has been done. And I mean, like a lot has happened last year with COVID. I understand that. But from a standpoint of, especially like those 3 houses, like my house and the other 2 neighbors, the water is always there because the rest of them it's underground or buried, whatever you want to call it, buried pipe. And even across to the right side of the wall back, I know it's buried pipe, but if that water has nowhere to go, it will go in people's basement.
Right. As I understand it, the city council meeting is in person now, right?
Yes.
So if you can't get, if the city council, your city councilman doesn't return your phone calls or something, I know where you'll be. You'll be at the city council meeting and you can talk to them.
I would say reach out to Public Works and see what they have to say. That's what I was trying to answer before. There's different responsibilities in different subdivisions across the city. And I'm really not in a position to answer what obligations the city has or what the private property owners have when there's a stormwater easement across their property. That's something that the Public Works Department would have to answer for you.
Okay. Well, something to think about for you before you build how you're going to sell those homes as well. Just putting it out there. Thank you.
Any other comments? Name and address, please.
Yeah. Joe Rod, 4235 Eisenhower Court, Ames, Iowa. We live in Bloomington Townhomes Association. Our back deck, down below, there is a drainage ditch that goes behind our house and then on out and under and then out into Ada Hayden Park. Okay. Several years ago, we had a downpour and that water came up halfway to our house onto our lawn. We sat up all night watching that water come up, thinking we might have to start moving stuff out of their down level. So this has happened to us before. Other units to the west of us in our association are just 10 feet away. I mean, just a little bit of flooding, they're gonna be just done down there. And there are trees in that area. Those trees, you know, they could get wet and fall, whatever. So I'm really concerned about that. And if that happens to us, who's liable for that? What if we have a problem? I want to know who's liable for that. So I don't know. Oh, how about access? You said there's going to be access to Ada Hayden from up above. Access to Ada Hayden. We just walk down the street, you know, and go out there. But so if these homes up there, they said they would be accessible to this area that will be built. Is that right?
We said the developer's exploring putting a trail through from Hyde directly into the park. That's not a commitment or an agreement.
They're going to build something?
They're exploring that option. We have not agreed to it, nor have they committed to doing it yet.
Okay, okay, all right, okay. Now behind us right now, they put fence posts up and barbed wire, and yesterday I saw horses out there, which is fine with me. But the thing I'm concerned about is the water and what might happen to our area. So I'd like that to be considered. I think that's it. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Anybody else?
be short. My name is Kent Kirby, and I live at 4232 Eisenhower Court. I'm the president of the association Bloomington Townhomes. As you are well aware now, we do have a concern about water, and that's obvious. Also, for me, I have a concern of 200 families in that small area with Hyde Road, with one road out. I mean, in the morning it's busy, at night it's busy. There's no room for expansion. I just worry about how the community is going to handle 200 homes, 200 families in there, and the garbage pickup and the normal pollution. I realize that we have to expand somewhere, but this is sort of I know everybody has a precious area, but so close to Ada Hayden Park, I think it's a real mistake to change this to family dwelling, because it's just going to go push it north, and now we're setting a precedent of being so close to Ada Hayden. And the water issue is one thing, but it's also the population density up there and the effect on Ada Hayden, just with the people. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, anybody else have any comments? Okay, nobody else. Seeing nobody else, public comments closed, and city staff, any more comments? The applicant, any more comments? No. Okay. Commission. Any discussion between us? Okay, hearing none, move on to a recommendation or a motion. Anybody have a motion?
I would move approval of alternative 1, that the Planning and Zoning Commission recommend that the City Council approve the request for rezoning from A agriculture to FS-RL suburban low density with the attached master plan based on the staff's findings and conclusions as found in the addendum.
Do I have a second?
A second.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, say nay. So approved. Alternative 1. Moving on to item number.
Just for those that are present, this item will move on to City Council at a public hearing. There'll be another notice for that meeting later probably this month.
Excuse me?
It'll probably be later this month will be the next public hearing on this item.
Okay. And now item number 7, draft subdivision text for chapter 23. Is that you or Louise? Or?
It's going to be me. Sorry for the room to clear. So what we have tonight is a staff initiated text amendment to kind of clean up different elements of chapter 23. Chapter 23 is our subdivision code. And as we looked over it, there's a couple of application requirements that staff thinks would be beneficial to adjust. One of them is really obvious. We require paper copies and no literal way of accepting electronic applications. We intend to move towards that later this year. So we want to make sure that that's authorized where we have the discretion on how to take application materials in. The other components of the text amendment are outlined here. And one thing that you as the commission never see, but we see a lot of, is this conveyance parcel standard that we have in the city. So historically, there was a phrase called pieces and parts that applied to older lots in the city where someone may deed part of their lot to somebody else to either make it bigger or make a new lot, and it wouldn't be a complete platted lot. So in the past, the cities had different procedures around that, but currently we call them conveyance parcels because somebody conveyed an ownership interest in a piece of land without necessarily subdividing it. So we are required to not issue building permits for new structures if you do not have a complete platted lot. So we see probably at least 10 of these probably a year where people are coming in to essentially confirm their property boundaries. And right now they go to city council through that process. They're always on consent calendar. We think that we can reach the same expectations and just have staff approval of those because there's minimal to no discretion. We're not dividing a property necessarily. What we're doing is recognizing that someone did acquire, has the deed to the property, and can establish monumented corners to their property for verification of setbacks and other standards. So for us, it's a significant amount of time, and it can be very frustrating for different customers that we have across the city to find out they can't do something on their property. They have to hire a surveyor and go through a kind of a lengthy process. So in this case, we're keeping the conveyance review, but we're asking that staff can be the approval authority instead of city council. Now, one meaningful change here, besides just who's reviewing it, we have a category called non-conforming conveyance parcels. And what it was trying to capture was the older process of pieces and parts that if you happen to have a deeded property that didn't meet a width requirement, didn't meet a lot area requirement, or possibly you didn't meet setbacks, you got put into this category where you weren't really allowed to use your property without going to the zoning board of adjustment to have confirmation that your property and the structures on it were essentially as good as can be, even though it doesn't meet current zoning standards. Our opinion is that's kind of irrelevant because we have non-conforming language within the zoning ordinance. Existing structures are always permitted to stay. It's additions and changes on the property that have to conform. We didn't feel there was this extra step to the zoning board of adjustment to essentially confirm what we would do on any other lot in the city that's already been platted, to have that step in there. So we're trying to collapse that down, make one category of conveyance parcel and simplify the reviews and get to that basic intent, which is to identify properties consistently, but not be overly burdensome in terms of the processes that homeowners typically are the ones that have to go through. So that is a bit of a change. We've had this process for about 10 years or 11 years now, and we're trying to streamline that a little bit. The other thing that staff would be able to approve with these changes are boundary line adjustments. So if someone is literally dividing their property into a wholly new lot, staff cannot approve that. That still has to go through city council. But if you have two existing lots and you're moving a property line 5 feet or 10 feet, or you're consolidating two lots into one lot, that's a boundary line adjustment. And again, the way our code is written, there's limited to no discretion. You're essentially confirming zoning standards to make sure the lot line doesn't conflict with some zoning standards. So again, we think city council doesn't really need to review those. That's something that staff is essentially doing. There's no discretion really exercised. So we're trying to have, again, streamline that with staff approval instead of council approval. Most of the other requirements are dealing with details of applications and a couple other minor changes. The one other thing I want to pull out of here is the notice requirement. As we were going through our notice procedures earlier this year and discussing different things, I discovered that there's no standard in the municipal code about having a hearing regarding a preliminary plat. We've noticed them for very, very long time. So staff is recommending that we put into the municipal code that the Planning and Zoning Commission holds a notice public hearing for the review of preliminary plats. Essentially, we're putting into code what's been practiced for a very long time. So that's the summary of essentially the changes. There's some other things in here, but if you have any other questions, I'd be happy to answer them.
Kelly, I'm just curious, do you know historically why the city sent notices for preliminary plats?
When we went through people's notes and records, it was just on someone's checklist, and there was no basis in code for doing it or not doing it. So it's one of those things that's probably been on a checklist or in some council resolution from pre-2000. That was when it was 99 maybe when the subdivision code was adopted, and maybe it just didn't get transferred over into the new code, and it just had been done that way forever. And no one noticed it till now. Yeah, I was a little surprised no one could really point to why it was or wasn't in existence. You know, checklists, they last forever.
Oh, they do, yes.
So you're trying to streamline this and have city staff do more of the council's work?
So it's a little peculiar, actually. So the plats of survey, what council is actually doing is authorizing me to approve them. because that was
Okay,
the
and
process that
there's
was
something
invented.
wrong with having an additional step?
Wrong. I would say it's essentially a waste of time because there's no discretion really ever applied to these things, and they're on the consent calendar. So making an applicant possibly wait 2 weeks to get to a council agenda is commonly not a valuable use of anybody's time. So we believe that staff can do the same level of analysis that we do now, and I can still sign plats just as council authorizes me to sign plats now.
But you're not trying to short circuit any procedure?
It's all the same. The only procedure that's different is that category of non-conforming conveyance parcel.
Moving the boundary line within 2 lots that
Yep.
you own.
So we would only have review authority over existing land. If you're subdividing or creating any new properties, that has to go to council. Staff's not taking that on. So it'd be changes to existing boundary lines, or again, the conveyance parcel where you're monumenting your property and recording a plat of survey to do that.
So you would say the majority of the changes here, or all of the changes, the council has very little to no input on before or currently, and then the changes just expedite that for them?
I mean, they all are on the agenda, but the way like boundary line adjustments already have a statement that you can't require infrastructure improvements. So the exercising of discretion there is minimal. So it's a question of whether it meets setbacks or not. It's an administrative, to me, it's a ministerial level decision. I don't get to say, I think you should have 8 feet instead of 6. Sure. It's just 6 or it's not. That's how we look at it. And so we write a report, put it on an agenda, typically on consent, gets a resolution from the clerk's office, gets passed over to my office, contact the surveyor, tell them to bring a plat, sign a plat, they go record a plat. 3 of those steps don't seem necessary.
Kelly, do you know what other cities do, I guess, in terms of how they facilitate plat of surveys?
I looked at Ankeny and I looked at Des Moines. They do have staff level approvals for at least the level that I'm asking for staff. I'm not sure that anybody has a conveyance parcel review process the way Ames does, from what I can tell. I think that's uniquely us. But those were the 2 that I looked at.
Any other questions? Okay. Do I have, well, you're just asking for,
Looking for a recommendation to approve.
so a vote on this.
Yep, looking for a recommendation to approve the proposed text amendments.
Entertain any motions?
Jen's like, you do it. So I'll go ahead and move to that the Plan and Zoning Commission recommend adoption of alternative 1. Oh, that the planning and no. Yes.
Yes.
You're doing alternative 1.
Yes, correct.
Any,
That the Planning and Zoning Commission can recommend approval of the proposed text amendments to Chapter 23 subdivisions.
any second?
Second.
All those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, say nay. Hearing none, the motion is passed. Okay. Item number 8, commission comments. Anybody have any comments? Other than happy to see you.
Right, I was going to say, welcome
Nice to meet
officially
everybody
Mike
after a
and
year.
Jen. This is huge.
I don't know if I entirely favor it yet, but yeah, that's the council's choice. But I'm vaccinated, so I'm safe, or reasonably safe. So
Kelly, I had probably just a side sort of question. Why does the city not have any neighborhood meeting or neighborhood outreach requirements? Has that never been the case for any development at all, or?
I'm not familiar with anything in the past requiring it. So I can't tell you that it did exist and it went away. I've never been told or seen anything that said it was ever an expectation since 2000. I kind of just go back to 2000 since that's when all the zoning changed.
has there ever been, like, from the community, any desire to have, like, especially with rezonings or others, like, because I know at the city of Des Moines, we do have neighborhood meeting requirements, especially for rezoning. So I'm curious if it's obviously built into the city code, it's not a state requirement.
Right.
So I'm curious if the community here has ever expressed the desire, or has there ever been need felt by the council that there needs to be a little more targeted outreach to neighbors around?
As a routine matter, no. In unique circumstances, council's directed that there's a unique process. An example would be the Breckenridge project. They required Breckenridge to host a number of neighborhood meetings before their land use policy plan amendment and rezoning request. But in general, no, not with rezoning. I think it's not, I haven't really heard that request. I think the other, I would say the suburban zoning situations that generally they haven't had many neighbors. They're typically on the outskirts with very few neighbors. In this case, you had about 15 to 25 properties that abut the development tonight. Infill projects are always a little different. And if it's a city initiated effort, then we typically will do a little more outreach. If it's something that we're, like when we did Downtown Gateway rezoning, council had a built-in effort for us to reach out to different business owners in that sense, but there still wasn't a mandatory process in the code that said to do that.
It's interesting.
There's times where it seems like it would be a lot more advantageous to have a little bit earlier notice to people. But then there's other times where it's very routine, and maybe that's why it doesn't seem like there's a reason for it, or a need for it, I should say.
So I guess I have a question. I feel like I've maybe brought this up before, but with the stormwater kind of management situation, with any of the private detention basins, does the city have a requirement for them to submit any sort of like annual report that the facility, like the basin or any of the other stormwater infrastructure, is functioning properly?
I can't say any because I'm not involved in that step. Right, okay. When you establish a new one, you have a 3-year performance bond you have to put in place. So we do go out and inspect and verify that at least for the first 3 years, it's up and running correctly.
Okay.
I don't believe that we expect people to submit annual reports about what maintenance they've done. I don't think we do that.
Okay.
And then in some cases, and this is where, again, before pre-5B, 5B is kind of a critical moment in the city for when we established mandatory stormwater and then kind of negotiated on a case-by-case basis and established a lot more requirements, especially the ongoing maintenance and the performance bonds. So things that happened in the 90s and the early 2000s, it was a lot more case-by-case review and did not have the same expectations. So what we got and what was expected is a lot different than now.
Right. Okay.
And we don't maintain all of them too. So that's where I just can't comment for sure where we're involved or not involved in certain private stormwater facilities. Right now, if it's a residential, a new one, we have the long-term maintenance obligation as the city, but on a routine annual basis, you're responsible for mowing, cleaning it up and doing those things. But we'll come along in 15 years and dredge it or do something like that.
Okay.
Yeah, the case today definitely raised a lot of questions in terms of how we look at the impact from existing development, which might, again, it's a private development. Somebody else is responsible for it. But how do you make sure that what's existing and what's proposed, how do they work with each other and not sort of...
So there are expectations.
So those things, it definitely raises questions on how to better address it on a more broader level than just looking at that one particular site. So
it's just
I know it doesn't need to be announced.
Yeah. And again, it's a subdivision level. When we have the grading plan and you have the stormwater plan, you'll all be able to look at it and say, why is the water going there, or what happens when the water doesn't go there? You just can't answer that at a zoning level.
Yeah, I realized that most of the public comment had nothing to do with what was before us. But I felt it was best to let the public speak because they had issues. They wanted somebody to. It might be better for when we do something like this again to have Public Works here. to address some of these problems.
It's not something that's even relevant to the rezoning.
Yeah,
So they're going to review the stormwater plan. When we come back at the subdivision stage, you are going to get a recommendation from the municipal engineer that it complies with all standards and
Right. But
that's where we're going to see
this will come back to us again.
Yep.
And at that time,
But there's really nothing for the municipal engineer to say tonight. There's nothing for her or her staff to come to this meeting and say, other than they'll meet 5B and we have a conservation ordinance.
right
They have
now.
nothing.
Yeah.
But when we come back with the plat,
plats, then,
they will have seen something.
Yep.
Correct?
right.
And at that time, and we're going to run into the same problem out in West Ames.
But it's not uncommon. I'd say stormwater is the most common comment that you're going to hear,
Yes.
then probably traffic, but stormwater is usually the number one comment.
Nobody wants a brand new development in their backyard. I understand that. I don't.
Well, it's not what we heard tonight. I mean, that isn't uncommon for an infill situation to hear that first, but in
Right.
this case, it's just be cognizant of the what's
But-
happening out
Right.
here and make sure that this works. Which, and we'll see that at the
But
preliminary.
what I'm saying is that when it comes back to us again as a plat, it might be helpful for the audience to hear from the stormwater people that, hey, this is what we've looked at it, and their property will handle the water. They're not. I know what the code reads because when they developed the houses around mine, I read up on it a little bit. They're not supposed to force any water over onto existing properties. But it'd be,
So I just can't.
It might be beneficial
for another department head to bring their staff to the Planning and Zoning Commission meetings. That's why I'm kind of being quiet about it. It's usually at City Council that the engineering staff is present if it's a controversial issue.
right,
So
but all we can do is say, hey, take it to the city council.
Well, but
And that
no, because
sounds pretty damn cold to me.
that's not what we're saying. Again, if we're recommending approval, it's because the city has evaluated and that plan is available and anybody can inspect and review that plan before the meeting and interact with staff all they want before this meeting. So that's where it's not just you have to wait. It's been analyzed. We're making a recommendation, and people do get in touch with us ahead of time, especially if they know there's a sequence of meetings or projects coming down the road for a site.
Well, I don't think they know the steps that
They
it
don't.
takes. We know that the annexation comes first, then we know the master plan, and then the plat plan, and all that comes before us. They don't.
I understand that.
And every one of them they're concerned about their property.
So I think uniquely you had the conservation ordinance showing green space for the master plan that you don't see in most rezoning. So it definitely was able to draw out that issue because you were seeing up front a green area that was not going to be built on rather than just all yellow across the 60 acres. And in this case, you did have the unique situation of stormwater facilities on 3 separate developments abutting the property of the site. That's a little unique also. That like literally 3 separate facilities are abutting the development project, not inside the project on the edge. That's a bit unique too.
Right, they're asking too, where can we bring it to?
But that's always.
I know this is not ours.
Yeah.
Right.
And
Our
that's
venue.
where we have to have answers to say, you have to talk to the appropriate staff. It's public works. And we can't go out too far and say, oh yeah, we're going to take care of that because it isn't necessarily our obligation.
Right, I understand
And the
that.
city has
And that's why
systems,
if
yeah.
you have somebody from them here, they can,
It's just not going
They
to
can
happen
do a
in
little-
rezoning. It's just too abstract.
Yeah.
It's,
I mean,
there
you're-
won't be staff
You're
here. for a
extending
reason.
outside of that particular project that's set before
So
us.
there should not be a dialogue between engineering staff and neighbors at a public hearing about a rezoning. That is not the situation that this is for. It just isn't. So
should
that's
wait
not
to
gonna happen.
council meeting?
If people have questions, they need to contact Public Works, which is what we told everyone to do tonight. There shouldn't be dialogue with planning to the audience. That's not the point of the hearing. It's to take testimony and make a decision. So
Right.
bringing more staff in to talk about issues that are citywide issues or capital improvement projects, that just isn't relevant to the decision that was on the table.
Right, they wanted somebody to hold their hand is what they wanted to.
Yep. And that's
And-
usually when we go out in the hall after the meeting and and get them connected with where they need to go and be as responsive as we can.
Right. Like I said, I realized that most of what was talked about at that podium was not in the purview of what we were doing. But
the plat review process period, it would be more appropriate for them.
yes,
Right.
Like I say, they'll have the plat be made public, and people can look at it and contact the appropriate city staff.
Yeah. And I mean, you see the utility plan, you see the pipe sizes, you see, I mean, you don't have any of the information that you don't have that the detention pond has a 36-inch pipe outlet that goes under high that goes to another spot. Well, that's why there's no drainage issues. It already has an outlet that's more than adequately sized. So you just don't have that at a zoning level. Yeah, I mean, we talked about it quite a bit.
Hey, Kelly, could you send either a copy or a link to the conservation ordinance? I would
Yeah, so
appreciate
it's
that.
chapter 23 of the municipal code. So
Okay.
I can send that.
Yeah,
Yep.
thank you.
any other commission comments? Staff comments?
Just that we just did this short subdivision code amendment kind of around applications. You're going to have another one for the zoning ordinance as well. A lot of administrative process changes, updates, application requirements. So that maybe at the next meeting, we might wait till July. It depends on how a couple of things move forward here.
I forgot one thing. After our last meeting, I had somebody come to my house and wanted to talk to me about the meeting and the drainage district and all that stuff. And I talked to Kelly about it, and I talked to city attorney, and just to make sure that I wasn't violating any rules or anything. But
and what I told John is we do not expect any of you to field calls directly from the public. You're not the city council. You're not a political elected person. So when people ask us, should we try to meet with the commissioners, we say no. We've always advised you, please don't. I can't stop you if you do, but at least disclose it if you do. So there's no ex parte communications that would cloud the record, but you're not obligated to speak with people. We try not to let developers find you. So I've never heard of someone driving to a commissioner's house and knocking on their door. You're definitely not obligated to deal with that.
yes, it was a little bit of a shock.
And let me know if that happens.
And just wanted to let everybody else know it could happen.
Good to know.
So I don't even know how he found out where I live, but anything else? I'll entertain a motion for adjournment if anybody wants to.
I'll make a motion to adjourn.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
We're adjourned.